Okay, cool. So here we are. My name is Megan Bhatia. I am the host of Amory Podcast. And if you don't know it, it is a podcast where I share my relationship journey of being in a polyamorous relationship and with my husband of, ooh, I don't know how many years, 16 years now, is that right? And then my partner, Kyle, and we've been together about, I've known him about 3 years. So it's been a really intense, crazy, beautiful journey. And we just kind of decided to share what we're learning. And I love learning and I love sharing. And that's why we are sitting here with Justina, because Justina Morris popped into one of our conversations we were having. And it was like this, it was very intimate. And we just started talking. And there was so much that Justina had learned recently that I was like, oh my gosh, can I just ask you questions now? And that is one of my favorite things to do, is to create the environments where we feel safe and where we can learn and share and grow together. And that's what the intention of this conversation is. Justina, thank you so much for your willingness to just honestly test out this new format. I'm like, hey, I have this idea that I want to share more stories and more love stories, in particular self-love stories. And you were open and eager and willing to share your story. And I'm excited because I don't know too much. I have little pieces of it. But that's my favorite experience, is when I first learn someone's story, because there's always so much there, and it's authentic, and I get to ask you questions about your journey, and then we get to open it up and learn and share together. So I thank you so much. And again, for anyone listening, please ask questions. You can type it in the chat box, and then we will stop recording, and and then I will. And then we can just talk, all of us. And I'm sure, Justina, you're going to bring up some really good points. So without further ado, please take the floor.
Yeah, thank you so much, Megan, for the opportunity to be here and to have this conversation. I don't know, did you want me to sort of introduce myself a bit before? Please, or do you want me to just,
kind of give a little background, and then we can get into your kind of your learning journey.
Yeah, so I guess I'm going to sort of pull up what I had sent to you, even though I wasn't going to read notes, just so I can sort of summarize my introduction. So yeah, my name's Justina. I am currently residing in Vancouver, BC. I grew up in small town, Nova Scotia, rural area, very small. I say everybody knows everybody, gossip flows like water, and diversity is lacking. But, you know, it has its quirks and quirks, but it was a great place to grow up, surrounded very closely by all of my family, and very blessed to have had that opportunity. More about myself, sort of since high school, I had always sort of been curious and had an interest in relating with more than one person. I didn't know, other than like, oh, you could have a threesome and then that's that. But like, I didn't know what else was out there. So I moved to Ontario after university in about 2011, I think. And when my eyes were open to a whole new diverse world and culture of the queer community and of polyamory and what that was, and just a very tiny glimpse into some of the ways that that could look. A little bit more about sort of my professional background. I'm a nurse practitioner. For those of you who don't know, that means I'm a registered nurse, and I went back and upgraded my education, got my master's degree, and that allows me to diagnose and order diagnostic testing and prescribe medications. And currently I'm in a role where I am a primary care provider for family and all ages primary care clinic. And I am not super huge on labels. In society, we love to label everything, and to paint sort of a clearer picture of my current relationship. I would sort of describe it as an open-minded triad. So there's myself and my wife, Lacey. We have been dating since about 2010, married since 2016. And then Essie is our other partner. And she grew into our hearts about 4 years ago, almost in July of 2017. And we currently all live together here in Vancouver. And yeah, I'll stop there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was so interested, and I am so interested in so many parts of your journey. I think growing up in a small town, I'm curious about your journey into embracing your sexuality, and wondering, how did that happen? When did it happen? Did you find when you were able to move and connect with the community, did that make a big difference? And how has that shaped part of your world, your identity?
Yeah, so for myself, I've always sort of identified or felt like I was like a sexual being. I would say I sort of started into experiencing things with myself and with others with myself at a quite a young age, and then with others probably still what most would consider a fairly young age. We won't get into logistics there. And so, small town, not a whole lot of choice of folks. My school class was it varied anywhere between 20 to 30-ish people from grade primary until grade 12. We all grew up together, the same sort of group of people. So, nobody in my class that I was interested in sexually. Few people I sort of allowed myself to explore with just because that was my options. And I had always, well, not always, probably from maybe like junior high, I thought, oh, like it would be kind of cool to like hook up with a girl. That would be fun. But again, limited options, limited opportunities, didn't really have many queer friends. I really had no queer friends, but there was a few people in our school that identified as queer. But mostly in our small town, it was sort of not something that was in much existence and wasn't super supported by a lot of people, I think. So it wasn't actually until after high school for me that I began into exploring my relationship to women and what that could and may look like. And funny enough, Lacey and I started hanging out, I think probably around 2009, 2010. And that she identified as a queer person, and I knew that. But I had never, we grew up together going to school. She was a couple of grades ahead of me. I was never interested in her that way, and we weren't really friends. But after high school, we ended up connecting. And I think that was the start, looking back, the start of many, synchronicities that have continued to unfold. So she had reached out one night, asked if I wanted to make out, and I was like, yeah, like let's do it. And then she was like, oh, like, and her brother and I actually went to high school together in the same class, and so he was like, nah, like she's just pulling your leg and like she's not serious. But I was totally serious. And so we hung out and the rest is history, I guess.
Oh, and it sounds like it was a really good connection, and obviously you're here and your connection has expanded. Was When did the concept of polyamory enter the picture? Yeah, I'll just leave it at that simple question right now.
Yeah. So I guess both Lacey and I had been in relationships with men prior to being with each other that were long term. And sort of coming out of those, she was moving to a new province, and it was the summer, and we were both just sort of looking for something fun. But we both identified at the time as like bisexual. Again, if we have to put a label on it. And so we, from the time we started hanging out, we knew that about each other, and we had open and honest communication from the start, discussing like that we would be open to still connecting with both genders and with other people, not just with each other. And so the discussions really started, I would say, I mean, I don't remember exactly, but quite early on in our relationship. And then she moved across the country to a different province. And so we sort of initially, we weren't planning on being anything serious, but when I had to say goodbye to her after a few months of spending real quality time together, I knew in my heart that I loved her, but I was like, I can't say this. It's too soon. This is crazy. Maybe it's just because it's my first experience with a girl. Like I'm just, and so I'm overthinking all of it. But we continued to talk daily. And at that time, for the first few months, we weren't in a relationship. And then a few months after that, she came home and asked me to be her girlfriend. And so we did long distance for about maybe a little less than a year. And during that time, there was, sort of ongoing discussions as to whether we were just going to be with each other during that time or with other people, and, how that could look and what would feel comfortable for us.
It's interesting. I almost wonder, this is just from my 2 cents. I feel like it tends to be easier, the conversation of polyamory in couples who are attracted to both genders or any and all genders. It seems like that is a more natural fit, and it makes the conversation feel like it's more organic, and that it's not like an actual step or hurdle to go through. I know a lot of people struggle with that conversation. It sounds like it wasn't even a question,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty amazing. And it sounds like, I mean, I'm curious on how SC, who I think is part of the conversation or listening right now, so thank you. I love your support here. How she came into your life as well. And I know we will eventually get to, I think in the experience of polyamory, I realized for me, it was like, oh yeah, more love is great. And then at some point I had to turn the mirror back on myself and go, wait, there's something here. Maybe this is part of the equation as well. So we are meandering towards that point as well.
Yeah, 100%. I want to speak to, if I can, the first point about maybe it being easier to, have that conversation with, if both people are sort of interested in both sexes. I mean, obviously this is sort of my main experience. But in high school with my boyfriend at the time, when the conversation had come up, even just, maybe should we have a threesome? Like, what could that look like? He was okay with us hooking up with a girl, or us hooking up with a girl and a guy at the same time, but he didn't want just a guy, and he didn't want anything separate. So that was the only other time I've had a conversation, and there, I would say, yeah, it was a different conversation. Also, you know, we were much younger, and again, not really aware of the possibilities and not knowing what I know now. So yeah, and then speaking to how the lovely Essie came into our lives, fast forward many years, and I was doing my graduate degree, and Lacey and I parted ways again. She moved to BC, and I moved back home to Nova Scotia to finish my master's degree, finishing my clinical placement. I was having a hard time finding a placement in Ontario where we were living, and so we split up for 9 months in terms of like distance. Again, we didn't split up, we were still very much together, but at that time we had already had an experience for probably a year to 2 years where we were sort of in a relationship of sorts with another woman, and sort of had navigated that very blindly, and the waters were a bit rough, and so we had that experience, and our boundaries and our sort of relationship had changed, and so this 9 months apart, again, we were mostly, you know, just not seeing other people. We weren't like actively seeking other people, but we had, if something happens, if you get the opportunity to sort of make out with someone or to be with someone, then like you can do that. And like the boundary, I guess, at that time was to ideally not have sex, but maybe if you met someone, then we could discuss it. So Lacey met Essie while I was still in Nova Scotia, and they ended up having chemistry together. No pun intended, they're both chemists. And Lacey was at Essie's PhD defense party. They had never actually met each other before, but everybody in the chemistry department was like, oh, it's Essie's defense party. Oh, you don't know Essie? Everybody knows Essie. And so Lacey ended up going, and as the night went on, they ended up chatting and ended up connecting, and they, as Essie says, she rolled out of bed hungover the next morning to come out and hang with Lacey. They had made plans to like go to a street festival, and so for Essie, that was a big deal to commit to hungover hangouts with someone she just met. And yeah, so Lacey told me all about her, and she thought that I would really like her. And as we sort of continue to chat, I'm sure we'll get into a bit more of the sort of jealousy and the self work. But for me, being back in Nova Scotia, being immersed into school, and classes. And so I was working, like doing my clinical. So that was like an 8-hour day with an hour drive each way. And then plus work, like still like typing and writing things in the evenings. And so I didn't really have time for anything else, but I also was missing Lacey, and the past experience of relating that I had had in high school, little did I know at the time, is what really was sort of haunting me. And I was not okay with Lacey having, you know, a sexual relationship with Essie, as I was not involved and I didn't have time for that in my own life. And so we managed to talk through it, and Essie was very patient and hung around. And yeah, I moved to Vancouver and met Essie the following day, which again, I know I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for it, but yeah, I met her, and there was no turning back. It was I had, you know, these hang-ups that I was worried about and was focused on, but then whenever I met her, I knew why Lacey liked her. And as we continued to hang out and talk, it was one of those connections where I felt like I had known her forever, and she just felt so familiar and so safe. And her personality is very big and bright and dazzling. And so I knew that it was worth pursuing the relationship and how that may look, and that there was definitely room in my heart for her, despite the
challenges, we'll call them.
the chatter, the chatter.
Yeah. The growth opportunities there. And I think that that's where, I mean, you brought it up. And so we'll open that box of jealousy, and how did you work through that, and what did you find? Because as I've explored more down this path myself, the more I see things outside of me that then trigger me and they cause feelings, big feelings to come up. I realize that it's not usually about the other person. It's usually something that's happening in me. And that's why, even though this path of practicing polyamory has been really challenging at times, the more I'm able to turn inward and go, wow, what was that? Why am I triggered with this? What is happening? It's not easy, but the more I've been able to grow and kind of heal wounds that I didn't even know that I had. And that's where I think the path of self-love has been really powerful. And I would love to hear more about your specific experiences as you dug down. And obviously there was the willingness and the desire to have and explore this relationship with both Lacey and Essie. And at the same time, regardless of what your head was saying, right? It's like the body still is holding some trauma and some experiences and emotions. And I feel like we're in a society that has a huge lack of mental and emotional framework to process some of this stuff. And that's where you and I connected as well, and our desire to want to bring these conversations out more into the world, and to give it language, to give it framework, so that we can connect more and process all of the stuff that just usually sits in us. And I find you so bold, and I know that we're connected to so many people that are on a similar journey. So I know that as you share your story, and if anyone's listening, that they can maybe identify pieces of what they may have experienced or currently experiencing. And then for you to be sitting here talking about it, you're obviously through a lot of it. There's always more layers, of course. But yeah, I mean, I would love for you to dive in however you're comfortable in that area.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think jealousy had been an issue. Jealousy had been present for me. Jealousy had come up. Jealousy was a thing that I was grappling with. And I, for the longest while, was trying to figure out what was wrong with me, because Lacey didn't feel that way. Lacey felt compersion. She was happy and overjoyed when I would experience pleasure with someone else. She really enjoyed that. She found that exciting and made her heart happy. And my heart was shriveling up and crying out for, like, no, like, I want to feel this way, but I can't. Like, what is happening? I don't understand. And many conversations, many arguments or discussions of what we can do to try to work through this. And eventually there came a time where I felt like there's got to be other people who are experiencing this, and I can't be the only one that's feeling this way. So, like, what I'm doing right now is not working. So how can I change that? How can I learn what I can do? And so I started, reaching out, looking for resources, looking for, I guess, community in a way, but just mostly on my own, doing research, watching videos, listening, reading books, and learning that it's completely normal and completely okay to feel jealousy. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your relationship, but trying to figure out where inside of you is that jealousy coming from, and then trying to put in place, I guess, tools or mechanisms to be able to then soothe yourself, soothe your nervous system. So, it's not that you can never feel jealousy, but actually it's the opposite. It's that you should feel the jealousy, allow it to be there, be present with it, feel it, but don't allow it to take over your body. And that's where the, regulation part comes in whatever way that may look like. And so I started sort of learning about that. And then eventually I ended up, about a year and a half ago now, starting a course with Dr. Gabor Mate called Compassionate Inquiry. And his work focuses on connecting us back to our bodies and helping to heal childhood traumas. Oftentimes those traumas being things that we wouldn't necessarily have identified or thought of as a trauma, because we often think trauma is like a huge event. So, like, I don't know, like, say there was an earthquake and you survived that. Well, that would be traumatic. And we would all think, oh yeah, like that's definitely going to be traumatic for everyone. But say you were 2 months old and you cried and your mom didn't come pick you up right away, you wouldn't think of that because you probably don't remember it. And so therefore, you wouldn't think of that event as being traumatic necessarily, because that's just normal. We let babies cry, it's okay. But what Dr. Mate says is that the trauma isn't about what happened to you, but it's about, the trauma is actually what happened inside of you. So not the event, but what happened within you because of that event. And so, yeah, I spent the last year really diving deep into myself and healing some of those traumas, and in that process was able to finally realize what had been happening inside of me all of that time, that I was feeling jealousy and I was feeling all of these feelings that I didn't want to be feeling, but I wasn't truly feeling them. I was trying to stuff them down and push them away because I thought they were bad and I shouldn't feel them. So I think I was going somewhere with that.
Yeah. I'm interested if you can remember something. Was there an aha moment? Was it just kind of a slow unfolding of it? And was there something at the core of it? And if so, is that something you now are able to just recognize more when it happens? It's not like it's totally removed, but your relationship to it is still there, but it's shifted. Or do you feel like that's something that now you've moved forward, does it not even occur anymore?
Yeah, so I think I would say probably it was after a few months of being in the course and just sort of learning the concepts and the terminology and the way Gabor was viewing things which were different than the way we're taught in society or even in Western medicine to view certain things. And so I was spending more time going within myself and, meditation, or just doing the compassionate inquiry process, which is basically, going into your body and looking for the sensations that are there and noticing them and allowing them to be present and seeing if there's any emotions connected to them and that kind of thing. And I don't remember, exactly what it was when it clicked, because I wasn't working on my relationships or any past relationships in any of those sessions. But at one point, I just had this aha moment, like, oh shit, like, this is why I was feeling this way, because of the relationship that I had in high school, which was not stable nor healthy in many ways. And because of the way because of the things that happened in that relationship, and then because of the way I perceived myself during and after that relationship, again, I thought, oh, I'm fine. I've dealt with that. But by dealing with it, it was like, oh yeah, that happened and maybe this is why, and what does that mean about me? And let's chuck that in a box now. It's gone. Cool. Let's move on with our lives. But turns out it doesn't work very well. So I just was able to make the connection to what all that sort of meant and how I carried all of that into my relationship with Lacey and all of the other experiences and relating that we were doing. And I had this huge fear that she was going to find somebody better than me. Despite her reassuring me, despite feeling loved by her, I was so scared that she was going to leave me and that she was going to find someone who was better than me in some way. And I knew in my logical mind that none of this was true, and that even if she did find someone who could give her something that I couldn't, that she was still going to be able to love me. But I couldn't convince myself of that. My body and the things that were, I would freeze. I would, in situations like, just things would happen that I would shut down, and afterwards I would feel bad that it happened, that I shut down, that I did that. And then we would try to talk through it, but I just wasn't able to move through it because I didn't know exactly what it was. And so it was, again, trying to just stuff it down, but having that realization of where this sort of was coming from. And then even again with Essie, I was able to realize, like, we had been away, Lacey and I had been away from each other for 9 months. I was feeling a disconnect from her, just from that distance, you know, even though we chatted and whatever. And so I wanted to come back and just spend some time with her and reconnect. And I had this idea in my mind what that would look like, but I didn't communicate that so clearly to her because I knew that she was excited about me meeting Essie. And so I wanted to be excited to meet Essie, but I was hesitant, and I tried to communicate that, but I really didn't make it as clear as I could have what was going on for me, because again, I didn't really have a means of processing that at the time. And so I was able to have these conversations with the two of them when I realized, like, oh, like this makes so much sense. And, you know, this is what was going on for me at the time. I literally had no words to describe it, and I couldn't, you know, understand it fully at the time. But thank you for loving me through it and for sticking around and holding me in those shitty places that I was in, and, you know, crawling through the muck with me to get to the water, I guess, you know.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. I still feel like there's so much that we don't necessarily understand about our own fears, and how when we can't be with them, we end up generating the thing that we're fearing. And to have loved ones that are able to sit with us as we work through that fear, I mean, that's one of the best gifts that anybody could give, and it's beautiful. I know when we were talking or planning this, you chose the title Soul Elixir, Devouring My Own Medicine. And I'm so curious. I want to know what was that medicine for you, and why is that title meaningful?
Yeah, so I think, you know, working in the healthcare profession, I was working in mental health and extending all of my energy to all of my patients and to everyone else, but I wasn't giving myself the same amount of care, and it was starting to take a toll on my own mental health. And I finally realized, you know, something's got to give here. I can't keep giving from an empty cup. And so the first sort of step on that journey was doing the compassionate inquiry course. And in doing that, part of the course requirement was that you had to have a therapist to be able to connect with in case any big emotions came up through the processes that we were doing in the course. And so it's sort of, you know, here I was telling all of my patients, like, yeah, see a counselor, see a therapist. If you need this medication, you can take it, you know, like, and really, you know, giving them compassion. And for myself, I was like, yeah, you should probably talk to someone. It wouldn't hurt. But no, like, you know, you're too busy, you're this, you're nah, like, you'll be fine. You've got this far, you know what to do. And then, so this was sort of like, I had made the commitment to diving deep into working on myself. And this sort of gave me the permission slip, I guess, if you will, to finally get a therapist. And I chose to do psychotherapy. And so it's sort of a similar process to compassionate inquiry the way my therapist works, in that you're in your body and you're making connections to, you know, those childhood events, and you're going within, you're feeling the sensations, you're talking to your inner child, and you're helping to reassure them and heal their wounds. And so I think that was sort of the key piece, and realizing that I can have compassion for myself. It's like such a simple concept now that I have it and that I know about it, but it just blew my mind that I am a nurse practitioner. I have 6 years of university level education, and in this area of like Western medicine and healthcare and how to care for other people. But nowhere in there, nor nowhere in my life has anybody told me how, or that it was okay to have compassion for myself. And so, yeah, it's just like, what? And so I think the title was sort of inspired by that, you know, a taste of your own medicine. And in my case, it was to stop telling everyone else to do these things, but to actually take my own advice and to do these things for myself, that I matter, my mental health matters, and that I'm worthy of taking care of myself. And so Soul Elixir is what came out of my fingers. And I think, just briefly speaking to that, is sort of the journey that I'm on now, is just really going back and connecting to my soul essence, being my authentic, true self, not staying small and listening to the chatter anymore, but listening to my heart and my soul, and letting that guide me. And I think we could do probably a whole nother conversation on that. And given the time, I'll sort of wrap it up there. And
oh, I'm like, more, please, more. We can continue this in the form or the informal conversation that we'll open up. But just want to say thank you, because like I said in the beginning, your story is how many of us have a very similar story. The things that we are telling other people to do, or the profession that we choose, if we would just turn the mirror back on ourselves and go, wait a second, is it really other people need to hear this, or do I need to hear this? And I know that's something I think about every day when I sit down with people. And if I'm coaching, I'm super conscious of the fact that it is not hierarchical, that we are learning together, and that I am by chance across the table or across the screen from people, because their lesson is my lesson and my lesson is their lesson. And we can be better mirrors for each other sometimes. And that inside out way of living life has really accelerated my own learning. I don't know about you, now that you see that and kind of flip everything a bit inside out. It's been a fantastic tool. And I could geek out about Gabor Mate all day long. I love his work. I love that you've done 1.5 years of his course. And I just think, as more and more of us go down this avenue, having resources like him, and eventually, you know, resources, people like you willing to share your story of, these are the things that we grew up with, and this is the world that we've lived in. But we all have to find that inner truth, and that self-love, and that self-compassion, and that self-worth. And it is a very individual, unique journey. And yet we are so connected to so many other people in that journey, and it's beautiful. So thank you for sharing your story. There's obviously so much more that we could talk about. But any other final words, just on this recorded portion of where people can find you if they want to connect?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, in terms of where to find me, I guess Facebook or Instagram. I think my name on Facebook is just Justina Morris, and on Instagram, I think my username is I don't even know what my username is. Maybe my name spelled backwards and 29, but
oh yeah.
I think
that makes sense.
I think that's it. ANITSUJ29.
Yes.
And then, yeah, if anybody wants to reach out in another way, they could always go through you, Megan, and you can email me or something like that. And I think just on the tail end of what you said, you know, what you're doing here and where I'm heading in my newest adventure is into creating the new paradigm. We're not living like that anymore. It's time to shift things, and I think, you know, it's amazing to be here with you, being a part of what you're doing, and hopefully, you know,
thank you.
As time goes on, things will continue to just grow. And
yeah. I feel it too. It's why I want to create platforms like this to share more stories. I started out just doing it on Instagram, sharing love stories, but I'm really called to create platforms so people can have their voice heard. And because I know what a medicine that is, not only for the person speaking, but people that get to listen too. So Essie gave your Instagram handle. It is, your name backwards.
Thanks,
so ANITSUJ. So Justina backwards, and the number is 29. So thank you. I'm going to officially